Once again, welcome to all joining us today. My name is Adele Krach and I'm from Food Focus, and I want to thank the Dairy Standard Agency for sponsoring this webinar. The DSA is registered as a non-profit company. When you look at the objectives of the DSA, it has words like support, interact, maintain, integrity, and to promote the improvement of quality of milk and other dairy products in the interest of the consumer and the industry. The monthly webinars that the DSA is sponsoring definitely forms part of information sharing and education, and they cover the entire dairy value chain. Today's topic is yet another example of what they are doing exactly in sharing. So we've got a very interesting topic today. The topic is rBST, friend or foe. During this webinar, we will look at the following and we will discuss the following. What is BST and rBST? What is the difference between BST and rBST? And how does it work? Is it dangerous? Why do so many milk buyers ban the use of rBST on dairy farms? And the pros and cons of rBST. I would also just like, before I introduce the speaker, to let you to inform you that the position of the speaker during the webinar will be neither for nor against rBST. Since the use of hormones can be controversial, this discussion will be neutral. So with that said, I would like to introduce you to your speaker today, Dr. Mark Chimes. Qualified as a veterinarian at Onderstepoort in 1986, he spent his first 30 years in private practice, of which 13 years were spent in the UK. In 2013, he joined Delta Immune Laboratories as their remunerant technical advisor. Delta Immune is a company that offers laboratory testing for disease diagnosis, as well as analytical tests for the dairy industry. In addition, they also produce vaccines for production animals. In 2016, he joined the Dairy Standard Agency, the DSA, where he has been auditing dairy farms to ensure compliance with quality and safety standards. These audits assist the farmers to also comply with animal welfare and biosecurity standards. Through the audits, Mark visits more than 150 dairy farms a year. As a result, he has an intimate knowledge of various dairy farm management systems. Mark, we are so grateful to have you this morning, and we are definitely looking forward to your presentation. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to you. Thank you so much for your time, Mark.
Thank you for that introduction, Adele. My name is Mark Chimes, as you've probably heard, and I was asked by the DSA to do a talk on rBST, which is a very controversial issue at times. So I hope to get you up to date with the facts and figures so that you can make an informed decision with regards to rBST by the end of this talk. And hopefully I don't make too many enemies in the process. There we are. Now, in March 2011, a company called Elanco did a genomic survey. Now, this is nowhere near a scientific survey. It was just an informal one to sort of gauge the market. And they invented a fictional product called rJSP. Doesn't exist. They just put some letters together. And then they phoned people and they asked them, would they be willing to pay more for milk that rJSP? And lo and behold, 10% of the public are quite willing to pay more for milk that doesn't contain some other fictional thing that doesn't exist. Parties, only 9% said they will pay more for milk with that's rBST, which is an actual thing that does exist. But the upshot of the survey is actually that it showed that people's purchasing choices on that stage wasn't focused in terms of the hormones or rBST in the milk, or even whether the milk is organic. And less than 1% made their purchasing decisions were more based in terms of price, freshness, quality, etc. We're concerned about antibiotic residues rather than T. Now remember, this was 10 years ago. Since then, through the advent of internet and smartphones and that, we would think that the public are more informed, and therefore I would imagine that these purchasing decisions might differ now from what it was then. Now, what is BST? BST is a hormone, and the BST stands for bovine somatotropin. And in the old days, it comes in. The fact that the word hormone appears in there means that people put it in their milk. The only thing is that BST occurs naturally in milk. It's produced by the pituitary gland at the base of the brain in cows and distributed through the blood. And basically what it does is it stimulates the production of milk by diverting energy and resources, nutritional resources from the tissues in the body, and stimulates the milk producing cells within the udder to produce more milk, and also that there will be more cells to produce this milk, and as a result you have an increase in milk production. And it's important to note that BST occurs in milk. It's been occurring in milk ever since humans started drinking milk, and so we've been exposed to this for thousands of years. Now, what is rBST? The R stands for recombinant, and that means it's not produced by the cow, but it's produced by genetically modified bacteria. And what they've done is they've taken the gene from BST in cows, put it into E. coli bacteria, and now the bacteria are producing BST, and then obviously they're multiplied in fermentation tanks, and then it is separated and purified and made into injections. Now, initially, BST, it was really difficult to get hold of it. To get enough BST to treat one cow with one cows. So when they figured out that they can produce it by genetically modifying bacteria, suddenly there was a lot of rBST available. And because it had the name of bovine growth hormone, in the 1950s, they thought, well, maybe this might be a cure for dwarfism in humans. Dwarfism happens when people don't produce enough human somatotropin, and as a result, they don't grow and they end up as dwarfs. So they started giving it by mouth and injecting them, etc., and the results were incredibly disappointing. It had absolutely no effect. In fact, it was so bad, it didn't even have side effects. Just to show that the chemical structure of BST differs so much from human human somatotropin, and as a result, the cell receptors don't exist in humans, or certainly BST cannot connect to the cell receptors in human cells, and that's why BST has no effect in humans whatsoever. Incidentally, South Africa was the very first country to approve the rBST in dairy herds. This was in 1988. The USA only approved it in the early 90s. I think it was about 1994, somewhere there. It's approved in several countries worldwide, and its use is not approved in even more countries worldwide. It's not that it's necessarily banned, it's just that it has not been approved for use within. Specifically, Canada, the European Union, Australia, New Zealand, Japan, Israel are some of the countries where you're not allowed to use rBST. But incidentally, even though it's not approved for use within those countries, these countries do not ban the import of milk do use rBST. It's almost, if the milk is produced over there, it's safe, but if it's produced here, it's not safe. It's a bit contradictory, to be perfectly honest. It's important to note that most of these countries have approved or admit to the human safety of rBST, and they've been able to ban it, if you want to call it that, on the basis of concerns of animal welfare and not based on concerns of human health reason. How is BST used in dairy cows? Well, the cows produce milk for 300 days. That's what the average lactation is roughly supposed to be. For the first 8 to 12 weeks, their milk production increases. About the 9th week, which is basically when we think that most cows will in their milk production, we then start to inject them with rBST to prevent the milk production falling as much as it would have fallen if not given. We inject them basically in the neck, just behind the ear, in the neck area here, or behind the shoulder blade, and also obviously next to the tail base. The reason for this is there is a reaction when they inject it, and you don't want it to affect the cow's operation and that they will have difficulty. It might affect the quality of the meat if these cows ended up being slaughtered. Produce more milk, they need more energy, and because they need more energy, they need to be fed more to keep them producing their milk as well. Even every 2 weeks for the duration of the lactation. Now, what is the effect of rBST on milk? The first thing is milk production will on average increase by 10 to 15% in the cows that are affected the most seem to be the low producing cows. So a cow that's say producing 15 liters a day will show a bigger jump in percentage of milk that they produce. Say a cow that's already producing 40 liters of milk a day. So the jump in these low producers can be as high as say 40% in some cases, whereas in the higher producers, sometimes the effect is only about 4 or 5% increase in that case. rBST has no effect on the composition of milk. So the amount of protein, butterfat, lactose, minerals, vitamins, etc. remains exactly the same whether you're using rBST or not. But because these cows are producing more milk, in total, they will also produce more butterfat and more protein. And remember, some farmers are being paid on the amount of liters of milk they produce. Farmers are paid on what they call solids. So they will calculate if this is your butterfat percentage and this is your protein percentage, how many kilograms of butterfat and protein is in the milk that you're supplying based on the amount of liters, and then you're paid on your kilograms of solids. So there's benefits on both sides depending on your payment system. Packaging qualities of milk is not affected either, so it doesn't affect things like cheese production, yogurt, butter, etc. The thing that's very important to notice here is if I put 4 glasses of milk in front of you, 1 glass from an organic farm, 1 glass from that are pasture-based, where they go and graze grass to produce milk, 1 glass from intensive full feed systems, where the cows are kept in barns and they are fed, they don't go out and graze at all, glass from cows that has been treated with rBST, and told you to test the milk composition and tell me which one comes from which farm, you will not be able to distinguish at all. It's identical. You can perhaps test for the rBST itself in the milk, but that's quite a complex test, specialized, and it's only done by very few labs. So here we have the lactation curve. The red line indicates what the normal lactation in the average cow looks like. And you can see they start at, on average amount, then the milk production for the first few weeks increases and it peaks at around about 9 weeks, and then it starts to decrease. And that is then also when you start to inject the rBST to keep that drop from dropping as much, and it just maintains a higher level. And that is then the additional 10 to 15% of production that you can squeeze out of a cow by using rBST. Now, most large milk buyers, if not all of them in South Africa, require that their farmers sign an agreement that they will not use rBST in their herds. The reason consumer demand for milk that doesn't contain hormones that it shouldn't, And rightfully or wrongly, in the case of rBST, they don't want rBST in their milk either. And this puts pressure on the retailers, so therefore the retailers pressure on the milk buyers put the pressure on the farmers, and therefore the cows end up not getting rBST. And when I go on the farm to do these audits, one of the questions I ask, your signed agreement, have you got one? And they will produce it, and then some of these farmers will even ask me, but what is rBST? And I'm like, wow, so you just agreed to not use something that you don't even know what it is. I don't know how the hell you do that. Must say maybe one or two farmers are just trying to throw me off the scent, so I wouldn't go digging around to see if they're using rBST, you know. So you never. But in any case, during the audit, then what we do is we will go through their medicine cabinets, through their fridges, etc., to see if there's any BST there. We go through dustbins, their rubbish tips, to see if there's any package inserts, any rBST boxes or syringes, just to see, you know, is there any evidence that these farmers are using it? And then some retailers require an even higher level of auditing, where I would have to physically go and palpate cows to see if there's little bumps all over them from repeated injections of rBST. And I also look at their lactation records to see if there's any signs of discrepancies that are inexplicable. Now, there's the crunch question. Is rBST safe in humans? The answer is it has zero effect in humans, even if injected intravenously. We know in the 1950s when they were trying to use it to cure dwarfism. So enough research was done at that stage. And the reason is that the human body does not have cell receptors for BST. So it has rBST is a protein. And if you ingest this protein, it will be digested like any other protein that you eat. Whether you're eating meat or beans or any other nutritional proteins in it, the proteins get digested. The proteins are not absorbed generally. It's the amino acids that are absorbed. And the same applies to rBST. So very little rBST gets past the digestion process, and maybe now and again some of these molecules might absorb unchanged into the human bloodstream. But even if it does, we don't have the receptors for it. So rBST itself is quite harmless. They were concerned that if you inject cows with rBST, it's been shown to be the case. But the thing is that the increase falls well within what we consider the normal parameters of BST levels within from normal, healthy, untreated cows. It doesn't raise the BST levels beyond what. So, and what we must remember is that BST is actually secreted in the milk, and we've been living with that for the past 10,000 odd years since we started consuming milk as humans. And molecule in rBST differs slightly from BST. The effect, certainly in the cow, is exactly the same, and we certainly found that it also has zero effect in humans. Safety has been confirmed in more than 50 countries by numerous medical associations and scientific societies. And as I said before, you must remember that Canada and the EU accepted rBST as safe in humans, but they banned its use on possible animal welfare concerns and not on the human health concerns. It's also very important to note the difference between a protein hormone and a steroid hormone. The steroid hormones are your progesterone, estrogen, testosterone, anabolic steroids. They are fat soluble and they are absorbed unchanged into the human body and will have an effect within the human body. Whereas your proteins are digested, they're generally not absorbed whole, and therefore it's only fragments of the hormone actually absorbed, and these fragments seem to be inactive. So the main concern with rBST is not whether rBST itself is safe in humans. It is actually whether the effects that it has on the cow might have effects that could affect human health. And one of these things is IGF-1, or insulin growth factor 1. Insulin growth factor 1 is produced by humans in the human body as well as in the cow. And in humans, increased levels of IGF-1 is associated with certain cancers, most notably breast and prostate cancers. And they found that if you inject cows with rBST, the IGF-1 in the milk or in their blood, IGF-1 in the milk increases. And they thought, well, if you're ingesting milk with IGF-1, would that have an effect in humans? Firstly, IGF-1 is also a protein, so it's also digested. So very little of it is actually absorbed through the intestine. And the levels of IGF-1 within milk is very low. And even in cows that have been treated with rBST, the increase in IGF-1 in the milk is also well within what is considered the normal parameters for normal healthy cows. So it doesn't increase from cows that haven't been treated. And they found that the daily intake of 1.5 liters of milk will provide the same amount of IGF-1 that is equal to less than 1/1000th of that produced by the human body on a daily basis. In fact, you'd need to drink 270 glasses of milk to get the equivalent amount of IGF-1 that the human body produces on a daily basis within the body. So on the recommended basis, I think of 2 to 3 glasses of milk a day, the amount of IGF-1 that you ingest is, or that's actually absorbed, is infinitesimally small and is too little to have any significant effect within the human body when compared with the amount of IGF-1 that a normal, healthy person produces. The concern was because of IGF-1 with the word insulin in there, that it might increase the incidence of diabetes, specifically diabetes type 1. This is the genetic diabetes, the one that's inherited, to show symptoms within the first 5 or 7 years of their life, as opposed to diabetes type 2, which is the acquired form of diabetes. I'm oversimplifying it now, but diabetes type 2 is the one that happens through lifestyle choices, by consuming too much sugar, for instance, obesity, etc. So they've done surveys and they have found no difference in the incidence of diabetes type 1 in children that consume milk from rBST cows compared to those consuming milk from untreated cows. And just a matter of interest, insulin is also, all this insulin you get nowadays is recombinant. In the old days, they used to harvest pancreases from cows and they would produce it from that. Nowadays, it's also produced by genetically modified bacteria, similar as to rBST. Because you're injecting these cows with rBST, they're now producing more milk. And if they're producing more milk, it means you're putting more strain on the udder and on the cow. And that strain is what we generally call stress. Stress, we know, suppresses the immune system, and suppressed immune system means more likelihood of infections. And the high likelihood of infections, specifically mastitis, would most likely lead to a higher use of antibiotics on the farm. And therefore, it increases the chances of you ingesting antibiotic residues in the milk, or some organisms on the farm could develop antibiotic resistance, and that some of these bacteria could be transferred to humans through milk, and antibiotic resistant infections within. Now, first of all, the bacterial counts in milk is actually not so. All the milk samples are tested and the levels are set at, you must have 0 E. coli, you're only allowed 10 coliforms per milliliter of milk, and then the bacterial count has to be below a certain level, depending on which method is used to count the bacteria. Secondly, milk is pasteurized, which means it kills 99.9% of known household germs. So the chances of you ingesting bacteria through milk that are harmful bacteria through milk is actually quite small compared to the amount of bacteria that you're exposed to on a daily basis from various other sources. As regards antibiotic residue, it's important. I'm just going to explain the system here for the benefit of people. Systems work on a farm. When a farmer treats his cows with antibiotics, the first thing he does is he marks the cow, be it with a colorful tape around its tail, or they paint the udder red, or they put a strap around its leg that shows this cow's on antibiotics, so that if this cow inadvertently ends up in the milking parlor, they know this cow's on treatment, she shouldn't be milked. They then write her number. There's normally a notice board in the dairy parlor. They'll write her number on there as well. If it's a computerized farm where the milking process is computerized, they will enter her number on the computer, and the milk machine, if that cow comes in to be milked, the milk machine will refuse to milk that cow and will throw up an alert to say, there's a cow here, there's an error, please check. In addition, these cows are then separated from the herd and put into the sick herd or the hospital camp where they're kept. And the reason these cows are marked is so that in case a cow manages to escape from the hospital camp and goes and joins her friends in the herd, and she then accidentally ends up in the parlor, that she will be picked up by all these other methods that have been employed, because it does happen. If through all this, some cow might slip through and the milk ends up in the tank, the next step is the tanker lorry that turns up on the farm takes a sample from each and every tank on the farm, and that he takes back with him to the factory. And when he gets to the factory, he's not allowed to unload his tanker. He has to sit there and wait. They will test the milk for antibiotics first. It's a rapid test. It's extremely sensitive, but all it tells them is just there's antibiotics in the milk, yes or no. So each and every farm's that's been picked up with that lorry for that morning's route, samples will all be tested. If one of those tests come up positive, that driver has to dump all that milk down the drain. The farmer whose sample tested positive, he will be sent a bill for that whole lorry's worth of milk, which is anywhere between 150,000 and 300,000 rands worth of milk in one lorry. And it has happened. I mean, I have several farmers who've told me that it's happened to them once. It only happens once. After that, they make doubly sure that it doesn't happen. So the bottom line is, what I'm trying to say is there are so many checks and balances in place to prevent antibiotics from getting into the milk supply chain that your likelihood of ingesting antibiotic residues in milk in South Africa is extreme. The biggest part of rBST, as I said, is probably not the safety in humans, but probably more the effect it might have on welfare. And here the results are inconclusive. Some research will show an increased exact opposite. As it may, the package insert for rBST is required. Lists 16 different harmful health effects that may increase in cows receiving it. And these include reduced pregnancy rates, lower birth weight of calves, and increased rates of indigestion, diarrhea, increased somatic cell counts, and mastitis. Posilac insert includes one that says may reduce pregnancy rates and increased days open. In other words, it might take longer to get these cows pregnant. Then, on the other hand, other research has shown that the health problems common to all milk-producing cows, such as acidosis, lameness, and mastitis, are observed in rBST supplemented cows at the same low frequency as that which occurs in unsupplemented cows, producing the same amount of milk. And this is the crux of it. If a cow is producing 35 liters of milk a day and you inject her with rBST and let's say her milk production now goes up to 40 liters a day, you cannot still compare her to other cows that are producing 35 liters a day. You now have to compare her disease incidence with cows that naturally produce 40 liters of milk a day and then see is there any disadvantage in terms of because now these cows are under the same amount of strain in terms of producing milk. So you have to be careful that you compare apples with apples. Now, because of the concerns of an increase in mastitis, we'd expect that somatic cell counts and bacterial counts over the years would have increased. And antibiotic residues, you would expect more, if more farmers are using antibiotics, you would expect more samples to test positive for antibiotics. And some surveys have been done. rBST was approved in the US in the early 94 roundabout. And they found, and there was one survey, for instance, from 96 till 2012, antibiotic residues detected in milk trucks is now less than 1/5 what it was when rBST first came on the market. And a similar pattern was discovered with, say, somatic cell counts that has dropped by almost 100,000 over a period of 10 years. So it certainly shows that mammary health has improved significantly since rBST came on the market. What you need to understand here is that these surveys were done across the board. So it includes cows being treated with rBST. Therefore, there's a general improvement. More likely due to the fact that farmers have become better informed, they have better systems in place, they can pick up the diseases much earlier, etc. So, but nonetheless, all of this improved despite the use of rBST being introduced. However, because these cows have to eat more, there's a bigger chance of metabolic disorders such as acidosis or subclinical acidosis. And this is where the stomach pH drops a little bit because the cows are fed a high energy diet. And we know that subclinical acidosis is also linked to higher incidence of laminitis, which is a painful inflammation of the hooves. So you would expect a higher incidence of these diseases. And also because you're drawing on the body's energy reserves, if you're not feeding these cows more, they're going to start mobilizing a lot of fat reserves to lead to subclinical ketosis. It's basically the same as the keto diet in humans type of thing. And if it's too severe, they will start to show symptoms. What we do know that BST definitely does do is it causes a drop in the body condition score due to the negative energy balance. Not necessarily always a bad thing. If the cows were overweight, they would have problems with fertility, they might have problems calving. The heavier weight puts more strain on their hooves and their joints, etc. So you don't want your cows to be overweight. So it's not necessarily always a bad thing. And this can be just by feeding the cows better. So if your nutrition is spot on, and you're using rBST in body condition score. The one thing which is probably not emphasized enough, I would think, in terms of rBST is that it does cause an increase in the body temperature, primarily due to the fact that these cows are eating more, and as a result, they are fermenting more foods, and the fermentation process gives off heat, and this increases their body temperature. And also the fact that they're producing more milk. Your higher producing cows susceptible to heat stress. So there is this thing that cows treated with rBST are more susceptible to heat stress, and you need to watch the temperature and humidity index a bit closer with cows. The other thing is that these injections have to be done every 2 weeks, and they are painful because it causes a swelling. Don't know if I would want to be injected every 2 weeks just so that I could work efficiently. So there is that. The benefits, well, first of all, it increases the milk production by 10 to 15%. And this increases what they call the incremental or marginal profits. Excuse me. Remember, if you're milking 1,000 cows, let's say with an average production of 30 liters a day, argument's sake, and you inject them with rBST and you get a 10% improvement in production over the whole, it's 3,000 liters additional milk a day, 100,000 liters a month. And at the South African gate price of milk at being somewhere between 6 and 7 rand, you're looking at 600 to 700,000 rands of extra income per month from a herd of cows. Remember, your overheads on the farm remain the same. The only thing that increases is the cost of the injection and maybe a little bit of extra food that you have to give these cows. The rest of it is basically profit. So there's a huge incentive on farms, on certain farms, where it's justified to use rBST. There's a huge incentive to do this. And this means that you can, strictly speaking, have less animals producing the same amount of milk, or the same amount of milk, animals producing more milk. And put forward the argument that the same amount of milk from less animals, therefore there's a benefit to the environment. If you've got 1,000 cows and you're injecting them with rBST, theoretically you can now reduce your herd by 10 to 15% and still produce the same amount of milk. But that amount of milk is now going to cost you more to produce because you're injecting these cows, plus the ones that remain have to be fed more. You're keeping less cows, you have less cows to milk, etc. But why do you want to produce the same amount of milk and spend more money to do it? I can't see this happening. What I can say, though, is if you've got 1,000 cows and they're now producing 10 to 15% more milk, and you don't need more cows, you don't need more land, you don't need more fertilizer or diesel or electricity or anything, it reduces the carbon footprint per liter of milk. You have the same amount of cows producing roughly the same amount of methane and CO2, and therefore your carbon footprint per liter of milk has been reduced. And that is where the main environmental benefits will lie. So you must remember, BST costs money, and to use it provides no benefit on farms where the performance of the herd is limited by inadequate nutrition or poor quality management. The main benefits of rBST is to be had in these high-producing intensive units, full feed systems primarily, where the management and the nutrition is spot on. If it's some small farmer who's running into financial benefits, financial problems, if he thinks he's going to benefit from using rBST, he's hugely mistaken. Cost him much more to produce that milk, and he won't actually get the benefit, certainly not financially. There seems to be too much fixation on how much milk you're producing, when in fact you should be concentrating on how much money or how much profit per liter that you're making. How common is the use of rBST in South Africa? Put it bluntly, I think only Elanco knows that. They manufacture the hormone, and they're not saying. Our estimates that it's approximately 10% of farms in South Africa that might be using it. I don't know if it's as high as that, but because these tend to be the bigger, higher producing farms with top management, it could affect a disproportionate volume of the milk compared to the number of farms that are involved. But how accurate these figures are, I don't know. I can say with honesty, when Elanco still used to be Eli Lilly, it's told me that if you look at the amount of lactotropin that they're selling and you look at the amount of farmers that are admitting using it, there's a big discrepancy. Whether that's still the same, I don't know. I think over the years, the farmers that shouldn't be using rBST has certainly stopped using it because they didn't get the benefit. And it's only the ones that actually benefit from using it that have continued doing so. It's mainly your intensive farming systems where you get the most benefit. On your grazing farms in KwaZulu-Natal and the Eastern Cape and the Southern Cape, where there's a lot of natural grazing available, financial benefits aren't as clear-cut necessarily. What I can say with all honesty is that the overwhelming majority of the large milk buyers in South Africa require their farmers to sign an agreement that prevents them from using BST. Us auditors through the Dairy Standard Agency to audit that the farmers are actually complying with that. So in conclusion, first of all, as I said, you cannot differentiate the milk composition from one farming system to the next. There's no test available that can do that. You can test for the rBST in the milk. That can be done. And that is being done in certain cases where the retailers or the milk buyers will send samples off to the labs to have it tested, to make sure that the farmers aren't secretly injecting their cows with rBST. But it has been proven really difficult to develop these tests because milk is an extremely complex even more complex than blood, strangely enough, and proteins and other bits within milk that interfered with tests. So it's proven really difficult to develop tests where you can test for the rBST in the milk, purely because the rBST molecule differs very slightly from the BST molecule, but it can be done. There is no evidence that rBST or milk effect on animal welfare. Well, the jury is still out on that one. That's still open to debate in terms of how it affects it. And I guess we'll be seeing more research coming through on that part as well. Why all the fuss over rBST? Well, the consumer demands it, rightly or wrongly. They've heard the word hormone wanted within their milk, even though BST occurs in milk naturally anyway, and has been for the last 10,000 years, and that has not had any effect on us. But even so, misguided or not, the general public don't want it in their milk. They put pressure on the retailers put pressure on the milk buyers put farmer, and the farmers stopped using it. Finally, a prediction I would like to make is it is very likely that the use of rBST will be promoted in future due to its environmental benefits by reducing the carbon footprint per litre of milk produced. And there's an increased demand due to a growing global population that need to be fed, farms being produced. So we have to squeeze more out of less animals, and that's certainly the case for milk as well. So rBST might be making a comeback in the near future. And that's it, folks. I hope that I've been able to give you the facts in a neutral enough manner so that you can make an informed decision with regards to your position to rBST. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mark. I really appreciate that, and I can definitely understand why it is a controversial topic. I think you and I can switch our cameras on so that the audience can see that they were at least speaking to us. We are here in person. Mark, I've got a number of questions, and I just want to make sure. I think the first question, maybe there was a glitch in your sound at that stage, but the person asking, he says, you mentioned that you can test for BST in milk. I am under the understanding and the impression that the BST passes through the liver and becomes one IGF-1 before acting in the other. I think maybe you said that you can test for rBST in milk. Am I right if I say that?
Yes, that's what I've been told by the laboratory.
Okay, so yeah, I think Tony, it could have been when he said that you can test for rBST in milk, that the sound went a little bit funny. So okay. I do apologize about that. Okay, then I've got the next question. At the start, you said that only about 1% buy milk according to hormones. Why would it matter if the farmer used rBST? And why not mention that hormones are present in milk regardless of systems?
Came down to a question of wording where in South Africa, but certainly in America, there were milk retailers that started to claim that their milk was hormone free, which is an absolute lie. All milk contains natural hormones from the cow in any case.
Yeah.
And South Africa, where Woolworths at one stage had a label saying that their milk is rBST free, and taken to court and had to remove it because the argument was you can't claim that there's something isn't in milk that doesn't occur in milk normally. In other words, you might as well claim that your milk is free from nuts or it's free from alcohol or whatever the case might be.
Yes.
You can claim milk is fat-free because you've removed the fat component, or you can claim that it's lactose-free because you've removed the lactose that normally naturally occurs in milk. But the best that they can do with that is they can claim that the milk is produced from cows in which the use of rBST is prohibited on these farms. Farmers are encouraged not to use hormones in the production of milk. Those sort of claims you can put on your milk, but you're not allowed to create the impression that the composition of milk is any different from cows that are treated with rBST. In terms of the composition of milk, there's no test at this stage that can distinguish it.
Okay. Yeah, I think also in terms of that first slide where you said that, you know, the people hear something, but they don't know what they're hearing, and education and communication, you know, informing the consumers about these topics, I think is extremely important so that they can, you know, make an informed decision about the labels and things like that. Why do they make farmers sign contracts on rBST if it has no effect on humans, but they do not stop the farmer using steroid hormones that can have an effect?
Yeah, that is a very good question. The steroid hormones certainly do end up in the milk and is absorbed unchanged by the humans and can therefore have an effect in the body. And yes, if I was going to focus on any hormones, I would focus on steroid hormones and not on or said that I can't honestly tell you that I have any knowledge of how much the steroid hormone levels increase in the milk in cows that are injected with it. They're not injected. First of all, not all cows are injected with it, and they're not injected with it on a regular basis. It's usually only cows that are having problems with falling pregnant or they have fertility issues. They're the ones. And sometimes they might use it to synchronize a whole herd so that they all calve with a very short period of time from a management point of view. That's probably the only case where I would say a whole herd would be injected with steroids. Other than that, it will be the individual cow here and there. And if her milk then ends up in the bulk tank, I think that the milk is diluted to such an extent that it has effect in humans. But I'm guessing here. I don't know.
Yeah,
I don't
like you said. Okay, and then on the animal welfare, is the incidence of health and reproduction problems not more to do with the management rather than the product itself?
Well, that's the thing. As I say, all these claims is it may. I suspect, and this is the impression I got when I did research for this talk, that the welfare issues seem to be the articles that had a lot of welfare issues reported were the articles that were produced 10 or 20 or 30 years ago. The more recent articles on the relative health side effects of rBST, you don't see it as much. And I suspect, first of all, when rBST first came on the market, it was probably heralded as a wonder drug that's going to solve all the financial problems on every farmer's farm, and you had everybody using the stuff, including a huge chunk should not be using rBST because their management and their nutrition just wasn't up to scratch. And as a result, they had a lot of problems at that stage. Over the years, farmers have figured out, well, it doesn't suit their systems. They stopped using it. You know, the bad guys truck along the way.
Mm-hmm.
And also farmers have become aware of these problems, so they have put things in place to mitigate it. They've taken precautions. They better surveillance, disease surveillance on their herds. They pick these problems up earlier. In general, not just because of rBST, but in general. And so, yes, the fertility problems, there's so many things playing a role on it in terms of nutrition, stage of lactation, how old the animal is, the season, all kinds of things. So to just blame rBST is difficult. And I think that's probably why there is such a huge discrepancy within the results.
Mark, I'm not hearing you. Sorry, you said that's why there's such a big discrepancy within the results?
Yes, because there were how many other factors might have been impacting on the fertility of these cows. And that's why I think that as more research is done, you will find that the results will get better and better, because in general, the management systems have gotten better.
Yeah. Okay, I've got a comment made here by one of the delegates, and it was in connection with the lactotropin. He says that, his name is Francis Ruiz, said that it's not distributed by Elanco, but Lionel's vet, and lactotropin is bought from Elanco by Union Agenor in Brazil. So it's just a comment from his side. I don't know if you've got any knowledge in terms of that statement, but thank you for the comments. We really appreciate that. It seems like, do you have anything to say on that, what he said?
Comment all I can say to, so at least straight.
Sorry, Mark, you once again, your sound went away. What did you say?
I said, no, thank you for that comment. So for straightening the record on that one. Sorry, I think we're experiencing load shedding at the moment, so that's probably affecting the sound.
I appreciate that. And yeah, Mark, thank you so much for your time. It doesn't seem like there's any other questions, and we've reached the end of the webinar. And I just want to say thank you so much to you for making the time to speak about this very controversial topic. To the audience, the webinar has been recorded, and we will definitely make the recording available. Mark will also provide his presentation to me, which we would also then have as a download on our Food Focus website. So please make sure that you sign on to foodfocus.co.za. And at the top, we've got a banner that says resources, and under the resource banner, you will see all the webinars that are hosted by us. And we want to say thank you to the Dairy Standard Agency for sponsoring this webinar. And we are looking forward to the next webinar in May. That will be on the 24th of May. So please pencil the 24th of May in so long, and make sure that you are signed up for our newsletter so that you can get the information as soon as you know what the topic is going to be. Mark, once again, thank you so much for your time. To everybody else, it's a short week. Tomorrow is a public holiday. So I hope that you will have a splendid day tomorrow. And thank you so much for supporting us and signing in onto the webinars. And please, after the webinar, there's a short survey. Please be so kind to let us know your thoughts and if there's any other topics you would like us to present to you. So with that, have a blessed day and all of the best until next time. Goodbye, everybody.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Great, Mark. Thanks. Bye.